What's going on, everyone? Welcome to the Season Gaming Bitcast, episode 328. It is a fine Sunday morning here, made even finer by the fact we don't have to deal with Travis today. So, you have a special episode coming to you this week with just myself and the lawman himself, Mr. Hoeg Law. Good morning, my friend.
Yes, y'all are stuck with just the two of us.
God forbid. So it should be a good show. As we mentioned at the tail end of last week, Travis is actually 3 days into his 2-week Japan journey with his new wife, Dee. And, having a good time. We talked to him briefly yesterday. Sounds like things are going really well.
Yeah, we think he's literally in Japan. He's not just playing Shadows early with his new wife. So
we think.
Yeah. We don't know.
Convincing.
We don't have eyes on him.
So, next week we've got Monster Hunter Wilds, and we've got we'll probably have a guest joining us next week. But this week, we thought that the two of us would sit down and have a little more informal chat, include more of our live audience here today, because we're going to be talking about, obviously, continued conversation on some of the big games, including Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, Avowed, etc. We have our review of Lost Records, Bloom and Rage out. As well as a couple other games to talk about. And then we've got to talk about what's going on over there at NetEase, more, chaos, if you will, in terms of how that's being managed and what's happening. But we also want to have a pretty deep conversation, relatively deep conversation, on this new AI that Microsoft and Xbox announced named Muse later in the week. And I think that we can do that a little more... a little intelligently, I'll say, just because, for those of you who know me, know that I kind of work in that space. And so I figured we could kind of have a chat around what the AI model actually is, what it's attempting to do, how it was built, and maybe explain or help understand a little bit of what they're going for here so that it's not doom right out of the gate. So, but, of course, before we get to all that, we've got a couple things to pull up here, including our normal Googleman Super Chat. Now, Hoeg, you want me to read these or you want to?
Oh, I can read them. No, you need to take a break of your voice here. Somebody has to do something else on this podcast.
All right. Hit us up with Googleman then.
Googleman81 gives us 10 euros to say Mickey 17 is a movie I'll be watching. Also still playing Wukong, even though Chapter 4 has tons of bugs. Roxy is a super high-protein cheese snack. I think he just likes a fun fact at the end of his comments. I'm also looking forward to Mickey 17. I think that looks really cool. I actually don't hate Robert Pattinson as much as the internet appears to. I never got as far as Chapter 4 in Wukong. Obviously, these Souls games are beyond me and my capabilities. But those chapters are long. Wukong's chapters are separated by a long period of time. And so I think I maxed out at 3. I think I got to Chapter 3.
Yeah, the first chapter is a little shorter. It has a few hidden things, but once you get to 2, they really, really expand. And they have a ton of secrets. There's I would say a third, if not more, of the bosses in Wukong are actually hidden bosses that you have to find or do stuff to fight.
I'm sure I ran right past them to get to my location in Chapter 3.
Yeah, I can't remember where I'm in that game. I'm either late in 3 or early in 4. I think it goes through 6. It's a big game. Yeah, it's a very big game, but I liked it. You said there's a lot of bugs. I'm wondering if you're playing on PlayStation or PC, Googleman, only because on PC, I know, at least at launch, I don't know about the Pro and everything else, but there was a pretty big gap in terms of performance on PC versus PS5. So Mickey 17, I don't know why people like or hate Robert Pattinson. I get the Twilight thing, but dude's a good dude. He seems cool. He's a good actor. Come on, he's fine. What is that the one by Guy Ritchie, or am I thinking of something completely different?
It's the one by the Parasite guy, but I don't even want to attempt his name because I know I'm going to get it wrong.
That's right. Okay, cool. All right, interesting. And Grazie, a high-protein cheese snack. All right, I'll have to look that up. That sounds both tasty and dangerous at the same time.
You put it right next to your Slim Jim, you bite into them both together, I'm ready to go.
Oh, God.
That's good eats, man.
Oh, God. Googleman, thank you as always. Excuse me. And we have Tide's picks to kick us off. Now, this is one of the weirder picks I've seen. So I don't know what's exactly happening here because me and you look like we're about to go fight demons from hell. And Travis is just on an airplane in normal life, as it assumes. So I also on the left don't know what's going on. Is this a bus of demons that's headed somewhere, or
It's
I
headed to the
don't.
Bitcast.
Apparently, yeah.
I think they're just
Maybe
particularly hellish bugs. They're the bugs from Wukong. And then,
okay.
yes, I think we've seen at least versions of R2 photos before. So maybe this is like a grab bag with a special photo picked for Travis's journey across the ocean.
Yeah, yeah. I also like that he's back to being a ginger. We always love that. Um, but if you notice, is that his ear coming through the headphone?
I think he's got like a futuristic headphone that is just like slapped onto his head.
The sound goes outwards.
Perhaps.
Yeah, that's good stuff. I also don't know why I'm so shiny, but that's okay. You know.
I always look amazing. That's just how I am.
Yeah, you get the romance novel look again. I don't know what's going on here. It's
The AI likes me. It's important to be friends with the AI, as we will talk about, because if there is a takeover of the world, you want to be seen as a romance hero and not as an enemy of the AI.
Yeah, that's fair. Fair enough. So, Ty, thank you as always. We will check in with Travis. He joked about swinging by, not necessarily today on the show, but potentially. So we'll see. All right. So why don't we go ahead and get into it? I want to talk briefly, kick us off on the game conversations about Lost Records,
Yeah.
Bloom and Rage. So this is from Don't Nod. So the original creators of Life is Strange.
Yeah, they lost the rights to Life is Strange as a brand to Square Enix, who published that original game. And
Right.
so this is, for all practical purposes, if you love Life is Strange, Life is Strange. I mean, it is that kind of game. It's just they don't have the naming rights to that.
Yeah, fair enough. And also, this is tape one. I know they, like, if you looked it up, you would see that this is tape one, or they're calling it tape one. It's episode one. But if you just look at the title, it looks like a kind of a complete package. So you need to be aware this is only the start of the journey, if you will.
Yes, it is. It is a weird split, though. You say episodic, and that's correct, but it's not 5 episodes. It's not like the old Telltale episodes. It's 2 episodes, and the second one comes out in April.
Yes,
So it's not. We don't know when we'll ever play the end of this game. I don't love this release strategy, but it's also not crazy to me. So I was happy to see it has a date even on the menus of, I think, April 25th, 2025. And it says
15th.
tape 2. Oh, 15th. Okay, look.
Oh, wait.
You got 10 days just with that exchange. So it's got a date. I don't know whether they'll hit it or it'll be delayed or what have you, but it's clear that they are close to releasing the second half of the game. It's when I was a Telltale fan and they used to have the 5 episodes, there were times when like episodes 4 and 5 would get delayed by a year or more, and you just wouldn't know when you'd get the end of your game. And so I think this seems like a better approach.
Agreed. Yeah. So to be clear, Hoeg is near the end of this, so he'll touch on it more than I will. But I just want to mention, we do have a review up. Lewis reviewed this for us. He really, really liked it. I think he was really looking forward to this one. He really likes Life is Strange, and so he was pretty excited about this one. Obviously, I don't have experience with it, but he's really high on this. I believe it came in the Open Critics mid-high 70s. Right around that high 8-ish range. He was upwards of a 9 on this. That's what he gave it in our review. But you were telling me just prior to the show, I don't think you're that high on it. So how's your experience?
I am not. Yes, I am a big Life is Strange fan. Honestly, this series, whether it was made by Deck 9, who currently makes it for Square Enix, or by Don't Nod originally, always feels a little bit wrong. Like the demographic match for me is clearly not there. You're always playing as teenage girls, going through teenage girl things, listening to that kind of music. And so it always feels like I'm an interloper in the genre, but I do enjoy those games. I like any kind of story with a bit of supernatural flair, and Life is Strange does that much more so than Lost Records. I also really like things that have a kind of nostalgic vibe. I like Stranger Things, and it's looking at the 80s. This game looks at the 90s.
Right.
So it has as its main character a character that uses a camcorder and records basically anything that you want to record in the environment, and that's basically the coolest thing that this game does, because they use a series of filters on when you're recording with your camcorder and then the actual tapes that you make with your camcorder, and then those get put into montages where you hear a voiceover from your main character talking about the people that she meets or the environment that she's in or what have you. And it feels like Sex Lies and Videotape. It feels like that era of taking memoirs of things with a camcorder video camera, and they do a really excellent job of that. Outside of that, though, this is designed to be a lot less supernatural than Life is Strange. You don't have magic powers. There is a bit of a supernatural element. It's not as well defined in this. And the overall story is very reminiscent of something like maybe It, if you're familiar with those two movies, or the books from Stephen King, where you've got a section of the story that is in the modern day where people are reflecting on the past and there's issues with their memory that is maybe part of the story, maybe not. And then you go back to the 90s to kind of reflect on that with the people in the modern day, and they've clearly had some kind of major incident happen to them, and you don't know what it is, and you're learning about that as you go through the story. And then presumably tape 2 is more like It 2, where we have less of the flashbacks and more of the modern story based on what happens towards the end of the game. I don't know that for sure. I obviously haven't played the second part. It's not out yet. But it is very slow going. There's not a lot of impetus to moving forward in the narrative of the game, even in the flashbacks. So it takes a kind of more slice of life storytelling approach, and that's not for me. Even Life is Strange kind of gets deep into a noir mystery very quickly as you go through a high school life with magic powers and whatnot. But there is a mystery. There's a lot of things that happen in that game that are compelling to me. And I think Life is Strange Double Exposure, which again is not Don't Nod, is Deck 9, has that same vibe better than this game does. And I compare them not because this is a Life is Strange game, because they don't have the naming rights to it, but because it's a Life is Strange game by all of its DNA, right? You have the same kind of interactions of a young woman learning to be an adult, dealing with various things in her life, and then some kind of mystery that's kind of almost entirely premised on the fact that you're also simultaneously playing through these characters meeting later on in 2022. But I did not find it compelling as a story. And again, I think I'm on the last scene. I might be on the second to last scene. They show you the scenes if you go into the scene selection menu of tape 1. So I haven't quite hit the to be continued or the coming in tape 2 section of the game, but I think I have a good understanding of everything it wants to talk to me about right now. And I didn't find it as compelling as the Life is Strange games. I preferred Double Exposure to be an immediate competitor that was released last year, and was the reason I think Lost Records moved its release date, was it was too close to Life is Strange, and that didn't make sense. So it's more of a 7 to me, but there are very few games that hit this vibe. There are very few games that even try to do what they do with the camcorder. So I can understand it kind of resonating with you more. If it sounds great to you, you should check it out. I actually got mine on the, I don't remember what the names of these things are anymore, unfortunately, but the PlayStation Plus version of Game Pass. I think it's Game
the
Catalog.
extra tier, I believe.
Yes, it is. But the name of the access point, I think, is Catalog. I think
it is. Yes, Game Catalog. The thing they're trying to make sound like Game Pass now, because they say it like every other minute when they're advertising.
They do. Yeah. So I just forget it. So it's not working. But yes, I went to go buy this on my PlayStation, and it said you've got it already. So that was nice. I always love it when that happens. But I do recommend checking it out if any of that sounds interesting. I think the camcorder filters, whatever magic they're doing there, are super impressive. You take a tape of an environment that looks like a Life is Strange environment, and then when you look at the tape, it almost looks photorealistic, like you took it on a camcorder in the 90s. And I think it's really impressive when it does that. But the character animation is not at the same level as the most recent Life is Strange. Some of the other things are not at that level either. And the story, which is the most important part of this type of game, it's an adventure game, I don't think is there yet. And in fairness, they haven't told me the conclusion yet. So I don't know. But it's not a 9 for me right now.
Okay. Yeah, I guess, tape 2 was supposed to come out a month after. It was supposed to be a pretty quick follow-up, and they had to delay it an extra month to April 15th, like we said. So we'll see what happens when it kind of finishes that arc. We'll see if it feels better for you. I know that for Lewis, one of the things he mentioned that maybe didn't resonate with you as much is, he's a 90s kid. And so
no, I am. This is my wheelhouse. This feels like me. I'm in Michigan. This game takes place in Michigan.
Oh, okay.
So there's a lot of overlap there. But I can see that nostalgia with the camcorder stuff and the clips. It doesn't feel like a real place. It feels like a Life is Strange place. There's nothing wrong with that. But I can certainly understand people that are maybe more connected with the 90s saying, yes, this puts me right back there, and that's cool. I also think, I didn't mention it before, but I also think that they're, the standard walking simulator, kind of spinning an object around in your hands and looking at it for various clues or just to look at the object. This is some of the best I've seen.
Okay.
Their objects are immaculately rendered. Their environments are great. Their objects are awesome. Their characters, not as much.
Okay. All right. Well, cool. Well, if that sounds interesting to you, you can check it out. It's out now. Like you said, it's on the PlayStation game catalog. That is. I think it's the extra and premium tiers, right? The tier 2, tier 3. It's not in the
Yes.
standard.
No, the catalog kicks in with the second tier.
Yeah. Okay. Fair
Because
enough.
I definitely don't have the last tier. I have the second tier.
Cool. All right. And you can check out our review as well. That's up on the site. I want to talk a little bit about Delta Force. So this is a game from Level Infinite and Team Jade in Level Infinite. So Level Infinite, big publisher. They publish things from PUBG Mobile to they're the ones that are publishing the upcoming game Exoborn, which we saw the debut for one of the Game Awards events. They've got Dune Awakening coming later this year. But Team Jade is developing this, and essentially it is a free-to-play, very large-scale FPS that seems to be going for the kind of combination of Battlefield meets Tarkov. So they have standalone modes where one is the all-out warfare mode, which is like Battlefield. So you have like Conquest in Battlefield. Or Conquest or Rush. It's kind of a mix. So you have these different points you got to get to, big teams, squads, and you have operators that have unique abilities and gadgets and things like that. Then you have a different mode, which is an extraction shooter. So you can do a 3-player co-op, drop into a zone, search for loot, kill people, take their gear, and each piece of loot of various things has a value attached to it. And then you have to extract. And if you die before you extract, you lose everything. We've seen that in games as well. Kind of like I said, Tarkov, or even maybe Division Dark Zone, if you think about that space. And then just this week, they launched Black Hawk Down. So exactly what it sounds like. This is a recreation in game form of the events from the movie, and it is actually licensed in that vein.
Huh.
So when you kind of kick into it or go into the intro of it, it gives you the kind of real motion video intro of the events of what happened back in whatever year that was, 92 something, I forget. But it gives you those events and kind of, the setup for Black Hawk Down. And you can play through that, and that's obviously more of a single player kind of, mission-based campaign. But all of that, everything I just mentioned, is free to play. So as you can imagine, it's a very big investment from that company. And as you get into it, I haven't gotten into it enough to really kind of fully understand the currency model. But it's still kind of considered in early access, if you will. There is a couple things to be aware of. There is no native controller support right now. It's only on PC and it's only keyboard and mouse. You can use the Steam input to adjust and allow you to use your controller, where it translates, those actions from keyboard to your controller. It's not flawless. It takes some tuning, playing around with it this morning, just to try and get it to work right. But controller support natively is supposed to be coming in first quarter, given that it's the end of February. We'll see if they still hit that, but hopefully that's coming soon. And this is also getting a console release as well. So it should be on PS5 and Series X here in the near future. But I think what I want to talk about is the fact that it's, I guess I shouldn't be surprised in today's kind of gaming landscape. But the fact that this large of a game with these type of production values is free to play is kind of crazy to me. You know what I mean? Like, I played a match of the Battlefield mode, the Warfare mode. I played a match of the Extraction mode. And I mean, this is a fully fleshed out, what you would consider a AAA experience. Sound quality's good. The shooting's good. It runs really great on my PC. So I was having a good time with it. I want to spend some more time in it. But it's definitely one to pay attention to if you're in that space where you like FPS games with these type of mechanics.
What is this called again?
Just Delta Force.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So you can find it. Like I said, they're really advertising the Black Hawk Down thing because that just launched this week. It's all free to play on Steam. You can just install it and, use the controller thing if you need to use a controller. But I was pretty surprised at how well polished it is. I haven't played enough to experience this, but I will say I was going through some of the feedback and other commentary on the game. One of the things that's being called out actively is cheaters. So, apparently it's kind of a problem. And I know that the development team is addressing it. There's some comments on the site around the kernel level anti-cheat they use and how they're attacking it. So, take that for what you will. But in terms of playing it and getting some matches in and how it feels and runs, I didn't really have any issues. So check it out. I think if Battlefield 2042 has evolved into a pretty good game. I've talked about that. But the next Battlefield is still a little ways out. And, that kind of experience at larger scale, kind of, vehicle-based FPS game there's not a lot of them out there. So I would definitely give this a look if you're into that. So.
All right.
Yeah. It's something that we previewed. It was big at Summer Game Fest last year. So a bunch of us, hey, shout out to Xbox Era in the chat, who were there with me at Summer Game Fest. So yeah, they were previewing it last year, and they've continued to develop that over the coming years. So it'll continue to evolve. Yep. All right. So Avowed. I have not played any more of it, but I wanted to ask you if you had.
I have, although I have to tell you it's not connecting with me so much. It's an interesting product, and I shouldn't be surprised by this on the internet, but I always am. It's this area of controversy on my timeline and the various comments I get to my videos on my channel and whatnot, that Avowed is either the greatest thing since sliced bread, or it's just absolutely terrible and can't compare to whatever Sony's doing.
It's a 10 or 2.
Yeah, I know that's because it's a first-party studio effort, but I have said this, I think in this space as well as on my social media space, that I can't imagine getting too terribly emotionally on one side or the other with respect to Avowed. Like, it seems to me to be a very kind of mid-range effort, a mid-range result. And I understand people having fun with it. There's some colorful stuff. There's some interesting combat to have fun with. I also understand people being a little bit disappointed in it because it's not Obsidian at its best. It's not even as good or as deep as the Pillars of Eternity stories, in my opinion. And it's certainly not Fallout New Vegas. So I come at it and say, yes, this is a kind of middle-of-the-road effort, and I sincerely hope Outer Worlds 2 is much better. But I also don't hate it. I just don't love it. And even that stance has proven to be very controversial in certain corners. So I'm sorry for everybody I offended just by hearing that. Yeah.
How dare you? It's funny you say that because, I was liking the couple hours I played, but I haven't played enough to speak intelligently on it. But to your point, one of our comments from last week on last week's show from Xbot Life, the account Xbot Life, is kind of talking to what you say, because I think you and I were talking about how good, well, so was Travis, all three of us were, how good Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 is, and how it's just an exemplary game. So the comment we got was, Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 is bland and boring with too much busy work compared to Avowed, which is easily my game of the year so far.
The game of the year stuff was also an interesting addition to this conversation, because I don't think Avowed is within sniffing distance of game of the year, like not nominations, not anything. And that's fine, because I also think from an optimist point of view that means 2025 is going to have a bunch of really good games. But I think people saying Avowed is on the game of the year list, you can feel how you want to feel. I really don't think it's going to wind up there.
No, I don't think it'll be on the game of the year critically. It's not up that high, I think, from a critical perspective. Now, whether, as we always say, whether it's someone's personal game of the year now or at the end of the year, great, so be it. I know that, as Don said, Don was a little higher on it than Travis was in our review. And I know some of the people I've spoke to that reviewed, Luke's in the chat over at XCP. He really enjoyed it as well. So I'm looking forward to put more time into it. It's just, as you well know, KCD2 is a monster of a game. I'm incredibly addicted to it. And so that's most of, outside of Delta Force and some minor multiplayer here and there, all I've played this week is more KCD2. I'm closing in on 50 hours now. I'm still on the first map. I did do the wedding. So if you continue,
that's a big moment. I think that getting to the wedding is one of those areas where I see Mr. Vavra, I believe is his name, talking about how few players have even gotten to the wedding in the game. I think that's a milestone of, I'm really invested in this and I'm going to see it through to the end for people, because otherwise you can spend your life on that first map, you call it, but it's basically a world, and not get to the wedding anytime sooner than next year. Yeah.
Like I said, I was in the mid 40s in hours before going to the wedding. I had done all the side stuff that I have found, and you discover new side stuff as you explore. So I had the map basically fully uncovered. I did all the side stuff, did the wedding. Have you finished the wedding mission?
I have not. I think I'm actually in the middle of it, and then I got taken up with Avowed, and then the other game I'm going to talk about as part of this update.
Cool.
And so I'm like, I've started the wedding.
Okay. And no, Elu, no spoilers. Absolutely not.
Yeah,
But
no,
I
of
will
course
just
not.
say
There's a wedding. Sorry.
Yeah, and it tells you that right after the prologue.
Yeah, I think it's the
so you're
first
fine.
sentence of the first quest, but there is a wedding.
Um, it was one of those moments in games where you look at what a developer has accomplished and you step back and you say, wow. It's up there as a kind of experience of a quest, right? It is up there with some of the big ones in Witcher 3. Some of the big ones we know from those types of games that have just like, you're doing this event. It's considered one mission, but it's got like side stories and all the characters you've kind of met with and what you've done in the game to that point are kind of littered throughout, and you can do different activities, and then you can fail things or succeed at things, and you can unlock new stuff, and all of this contained in this one event with all sorts of different personalities and narratives. And then I won't, no spoilers, but you finish it and it kind of takes you into the next step of the main game. And I was sitting there just like, man, this is just superb. It really is superb. And I told you I'm trying to play without save scumming so I can kind of just live with my choices. But I save scummed a little bit during the wedding just to see what the possibilities were. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, that's always fun.
Because I like experimenting to see what the developers have done. Like, hey, well, if I didn't do this, what happens here? And it's really, really cool. There's just so many different things that happen. And I was just, I was kind of blown away. And it just continues to show me that from a game design standpoint and a sandbox standpoint, KCD2 is just up there, man. It's way up there on the list of games in that vein.
I called it generational. I mean it. It's one of those where you say this shouldn't exist this way. This is not something we've seen as possible before. And I don't blame anybody for saying it looks boring. Being a historical fictional piece is not going to be for everyone. That is totally fine. But the writing and the way they've networked the quests and then having that all in an active sandbox is crazy. And I say that as against Avowed, not because Avowed is trying to do the same thing. That's where people get confused on the internet. It's not that it should have been KCD2. It's that it released basically in the same week, about 8 days later, from Kingdom Come Deliverance 2. And it's trying to do so much less that you can't help but say, okay, that's fine, but you're not that ambitious. And because I am playing this other thing that is super ambitious, I'm going to go and gravitate towards that. It's not that Avowed should be different to be that game, but it is worth noting that this other game came out at the same time for the same price and is doing so much more.
Yeah, we see it all the time. What's the running joke with what is it, Horizon, always launching right next to like a game of the year kind of winner, with
it's
Elden
got like
Ring.
The Zelda games with them.
Yeah. Zelda and Elden Ring, yeah. But yeah, it just happened to be, and like I was pumped for Avowed, right? That game is right in my wheelhouse, but I'm just so engrossed with KCD2 that exactly what you said. It's like, well, Avowed's gonna wait.
Avowed is absolutely not a bad game. If any of you hear that when we say things like it's not something that I love, you are hearing it incorrectly. It's not a bad game. I understand why people can have fun with it. It really does feel like a trip to Disneyland or Disney World to me because it all feels kind of artificial and fake when I'm playing Kingdom Come Deliverance on the other console on the same TV. Like, that's just how it is. It's how it feels.
Yeah. So yeah, I've been loving it. I'm maybe 5 hours ish past the wedding events now, and obviously, again, no spoilers, but some kind of cool stuff happens after that point, and you can, again, it gives you the freedom to kind of take the next steps of the journey how you see fit. So it's been fantastic. And I realized, of course, that in the collector's edition you get a cloth map. Those are kind of common, some of the collector's edition, but it's of Kuttenberg, which is like the major city right at the time. And I'm nearly 50 hours in, haven't even gotten to anywhere where Kuttenberg's a thing. So it just shows you how big this game is. One of the guys that I follow on social media showed he has 239 hours in it, and he's still playing it right now.
I believe it. You could just decide to live your life as a blacksmith if you wanted
to. No doubt. All right. Well, that's KCD2. That's basically what I've been playing this week. You said you had another game to talk about. Let me hear.
I do. Yes, I teased that because my favorite game of the week is actually Like a Dragon, Yakuza Pirate in Hawaii.
Let's go.
Now, this is one of my favorite series of all time. And Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth, the main game that came out last year, was going to be my game of the year for almost the entire running time of the year until the very end. So it fell off at the end, but primarily because I loved what Outlaws had become so much that it became my game of the year last year. But I loved Infinite Wealth. This is RGG, the developer's way of making those assets that they spent time and money creating for Infinite Wealth, using them again in a guidance story. And if you aren't familiar with this is basically the story of Goro Majima, who is one of the quasi-antagonist rivals of the Yakuza series, but is a fan favorite because he's a goofy dude, winding up amnesiac, as you do in a JRPG, on the beach, not remembering that he's a Yakuza lord, and falling in with a pirate crew and taking over the seas surrounding modern-day Hawaii, right? He's a pirate. He's got like the tricorn hat that talk about landlubbers and shiver me timbers and all that stuff, but your pirate ship has a machine gun on the front, and your secret pirate lair is in a hollowed out mountain that has neon lights and all this craziness. And then you also roll in your pirate ship to modern day Honolulu and run around the spaces that you ran around in Infinite Wealth. And it's goofy, but even while it's goofy, RGG does this kind of melodramatic, emotional craziness in all of its games. It continues in this one. It leans on the goofier side of things, but it's still an interesting story. And the best thing about these games is that they put all these systems in, all these mini adventures, mini games, things to worry about that all build into your own character growth. And in this game, you're building a pirate ship, a pirate crew, participating in pirate events, finding treasures across multiple islands. And this is the Yakuza version of Skull and Bones that I never knew I always wanted. So it's not Skull and Bones, folks.
How dare you?
It's not Skull and Bones, Ains.
How dare you?
I'm not mentioning Skull and Bones for anything but reference here. But you do get to control your pirate ship. You get into little battles. They're very simple. They're very simplistic. And I can totally understand some people reacting a little bit less positively than I am to this game, because I do think I prefer the turn-based open job system methodology that they have developed for Yakuza Like a Dragon and Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth at this point. And this reverts back to the brawler fighting game Yakuza series, kind of original, only even a little bit simpler. Like, you really can get into a vibe for this game where you're really just tapping the square button. For me, I'm playing on my PlayStation, and basically decimating hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pirates or Yakuza or whoever you're fighting. But it's exactly my type of game. I love this series. I love RGG. And being a wacky Goro Majima who is a pirate in modern day is the crazy zaniness I needed in my life. So, yes, love this game. This is the thing I played the most this week, and I'm so happy that it exists. Perfect performance, as you would expect. I love that they make the Gaiden games out of this because from a businessman perspective, I do like that there are developers there figuring out how to justify AAA prices without gouging or without doing things that I think are anti-consumer, instead releasing Gaiden games that use a lot of the same assets. And you do get new islands in this game. You do get new environments and new areas, new characters. But it's clear that it is a project that is built off the bones of Infinite Wealth, which was also one of my favorite games of the year. So, lot to love for me in particular on this, and maybe for you. Check it out.
That's awesome, man. Yeah, I simply don't have time for it. And I haven't even put as much time into Infinite Wealth as I should have. But we've talked about this before here pretty extensively, but RGG just crushing it, man. Just crushing it.
They are the prolific developer that everything they release, even if it's 2 or 3 times a year, I find something to like in. And I apologize for stepping on your toes there.
No, you're good. Yeah. I mean, they have found a way, as you said, to kind of use their resources effectively. And I think they're a good model for some other studios, or hope some other studios take notes of, like, hey, here's how you can invest, create a full big AAA experience, but then utilize that, right? And we've seen From Software do this as well, right? They do that with their bigger games, of like, utilize some of those animations and the assets and the, all the various things that go into a game.
Yeah, and to tie it back together, I think that's what Obsidian is doing, right? I think that's what Avowed is. I think that's what Outer Worlds is. To give them full credit for that, that's another attempt at finding a middle road where you can make this cost effective to make AAA type experiences. So, I do think that Obsidian deserves credit for that. It just turns out that what they have come up with is probably not for me.
Yeah, fair enough. That's great. I'm glad Pirate Yakuza is cool. I'm sure Dan's enjoying the hell out of it. You did take us down the Skull and Bones route, so I've got to mark my notes here as another.
Okay,
X
to be
for the show.
clear, you're piloting a pirate ship. You're taking out other pirates. You're searching for treasure. I can't not think of Skull and Bones when I play this game. I do love the Age of Sail. I do love this kind of approach, but it's not really that, right? You're mostly beating up people that are still in a Yakuza plotline for the most part. It's just that some of them think they're pirates.
Fair enough. Oh, one of our regulars, Christy Fletcher. What's going on, Christy? Says, was Hoeg a pirate in a previous life?
I like to think I was a privateer, the white hat pirate. But yeah, maybe.
That makes more sense. We also got a super chat from my good friend Random Name.
Random Name says, I am one of the biggest RPG people out there. I still have not started Kingdom Come Deliverance 2. Played 1. It never really vibed with me. But Avowed hit all my high points. I think that's great. I would never take that away from anybody. I will say, as part of this conversation point, though, that I did not really vibe, as it were, with Kingdom Come Deliverance 1 for many, many years. Like, I had to bounce off it a couple of times before I kind of got into the meat of that game. And Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, even though I liked the first one, the second one is a vast step forward. It is significantly better. It's trying to do more things. It achieves what it's trying to do more holistically and better than the first game did. So give it a try if you're at all interested.
Agreed. And I think that one of the things that I think surprises people with KCD sometimes too is KCD has a stronger story and writing than you would expect.
It's strong.
Henry as a character, when you first start KCD 1, he's the blacksmith's son. It's, a little tropey a bit. But, he's just a normal dude. And I think, what eventually happens over the course of KCD 1 and now leading into KCD 2 is, he becomes a character that has really grown in the community. Like people, I love that vibe is catching on at Bitcast, by the way. But people really vibe with Henry as a character. He's just a fun guy. He's a normal guy that finds himself in these medieval hijinks, He
does. He's a little sardonic about everything that happens around him. It's nice.
No doubt. Random name, thank you, my friend. And congrats on the new job, by the way.
Oh, good.
Shout out to our good friend Luke over at XEP.
Hey, miss you, Ains, says Luke.
Hi. No, we haven't caught up in a little while. Obviously, we chat offline. Luke's been very busy though, doing really good work over there at XCP. So I think all of our, I think Luke is the person who's been on Bitcast the most, the most recurring guest. So I think all of our audience knows to check out XCP already, but I'll always mention it. So thank you, my friend. Marvin
asks, when KCD2 released, a bunch of studios made posts congratulating Warhorse, the developers, on the release, some with images combining their own game worlds with KCD. Does this usually happen? Honestly, it depends on the game release. It also depends on the personal relationships between some of the people at the studios. You get movement between the studios, and sometimes Sony will congratulate Xbox on a big release and use some of their characters, and Xbox will do the same thing the opposite direction. I didn't actually see these go out, so I don't know what developers we might be talking about here for those relationships, but it can happen. It kind of goes back to Hollywood. In the 80s, there was a bunch of movies that came out that had the blockbuster #1 most dollars in the box office. So like Steve Spielberg and various other directors and producers. James Cameron would have like little pictures that would have one of the characters handing off the trophy to the other character. And that became something that I think the video game industry emulated. We don't see it often, but it wouldn't surprise me with the release the size of Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 that happened a little bit. I usually don't have gaming news in my feed. Fair enough.
Yeah, and I'm not as tied into it as I once was, so I didn't see it either, but that's really cool. They announced, I think, a week and a half ago, they had already passed 2 million copies sold. So remember, this is not a gigantic studio, so they've been working on this for many years, KCD2, and it's a big win for them. So, Marvin, thank you as always. Appreciate you. And a member comment from Big Mad Mo.
Big Mad Mo, shout out to Ains and Hoeg. Thank you. I'm liking Avowed right now. I think that's great. I also have fun with Avowed. Hoeg, you sound better the more I hear you. How are you feeling? I am good. I am progressing nicely. I still burn out energy-wise from making shows, whether that's recording on my own, participating in Bitcast, being on Last Stand, or what have you. And I have gotten a little bit better at managing that as that's come down a little bit. Last year, when I recorded a show, including this one, I might take myself out for a day or two and just not be able to do what I want to do sitting at the computer doing executive function, analytical work, whether in my firm or making channel content. Now we've got that down usually to the same day. So like after I record this show, I'm probably out of the work business for the rest of the day, although I'm prepping a video for tomorrow. Don't tell anybody that you know. So that's really been the big change for me, but I am still frustrated and figuring out like how I'm going to feel after any given event. And it's always a little bit random. That's like the real trick for me, but I really appreciate you asking. Overall, I'm doing great. Ains, any Halo good news?
Good is the important word there. So yeah, shout out to Mo. He's been member for over 2 years now at the channel. Always hanging out. Used to swing by when I streamed more, which I need to get back to at some point. So I hope you're doing well, Mo. Halo, not really. They do have a very excited about the Halo kind of World Championship. You know, the Pro League this year, HCS. So they did that roadmap 2 weeks ago in their community live stream. So they've got 4 majors again this year, another World Championship. So season 4 of Halo Infinite, which is awesome. They've made some changes to ranked, and they've added a Coliseum from Halo 5 in, which is a very, competitive, loved map from Halo 5. So that's in the game now. But generally speaking, Halo Infinite is light in the sense of very small amount of people, from what I understand anyway, continuing to work on that. The focus is new. And so that's when they announced Halo Studios, they announced Unreal Engine officially. I think that's the focus for the future. So I don't, as I've said many times, I think any of the leaks that people are hearing about a new Halo game coming soon are being misled.
You know what's funny, Ains? On my timeline, I think there was a tweet that went a little bit viral that was sitting here sad that the story update to Halo Infinite might be 3 to 5 years away. And I almost responded, I didn't want to get involved in this conversation, but it's like, I almost responded, oh, honey. I'm not sure that 3 to 5 years is covering when there might ever be a resolution to the Halo Infinite story. But I did see that. I thought of you.
Yeah, and I could rant about Halo for a while. I promise I won't. But for those who know, Halo Infinite ends on a pretty big, not a cliffhanger, but it sets up what was at least planned from a storyboard perspective, right? Not coded, but planned storyboard wise, to be the big arc with the big villain in Atriox, as well as the introduction of, not the Forerunners, I'm blanking right now, but the superior ancient race.
Is that not the Endless? Am I getting my lore wrong?
No, you're good. Thank you. So anyway, I think many of us in the Halo community were really excited about that. Atriox is the best villain they've had in the universe. And like now with all this transition, the fallout, everything, all of that we don't really know. My expectation, and this is just a guess, I don't know anything. My expectation is we see a project like Halo CE remake in Unreal Engine, just because that'll allow them to get their feet wet and to really optimize for Halo in the new engine before going to the next game. But given what they did between Halo 4, then 5, then the hard cut to Infinite with story, and then not doing the continuation, who the hell knows? I have no idea what they're going to do with the next mainline Halo game in terms of story. They could do one of 10 different things. So I don't know.
Yeah. Well, and I think in the context of that particular tweet, the issue was that they were thinking that they were still going to make story expansion content for Infinite. And it's like, no, I think that was scuttled a long time ago.
Yes, it was. Yep. So anyway, Mo, hope you're doing well. Thank you for the comment and thank you for the membership. Tao, my good friend here. Tao
says, sup, chat. Sup, Bitcasters. Sup, Tao. So, Ains, what's the statue? Oh, that says statute. Yeah, I read it correctly, but it means statue. Backlog looking like. What's your statue backlog?
I can't talk about the statute backlog. I'm not up to date on
Nobody can.
Kind of bad, actually. not a joke. I have had a Dark Souls statue in its box sitting on a table over there to record a video for since before Christmas. Still sitting there. I have a couple more on the way, including a Elden Ring statue from a company I've never gotten a statue from out of Hong Kong. So that's being shipped to me right now. We'll see the quality on it. I figured I'd take a chance on it. So we'll see. But yeah, right. I've got more on the way.
Nice. Hoeg, what tabletop games are on the backlog? Well, I always have tabletop games on the backlog.
That does say statue, Hoeg. We're drunk or something. That does not say statute.
That's fine. No, I'm drunk. Look, all I see is statutes. All right. I will tell you this. I type statute enough that I think Word just changes it for me if I type it. But yes, no, there's too many T's in statute. So. Hoeg, what tabletop games are on the backlog? I am patiently awaiting the delivery of the Kickstarter for Final Girl Season 3. You can see the 2 Final Girl seasons back there. Final Girl is my favorite single-player board game, and I was never a single-player board gamer until Final Girl. I cannot recommend it more to people that are interested in good thematic board games. It is a quick play. It is an awesome setup, and it's a lot of fun. You have different movies and like horror setups and different characters that you can mix and match across different movie types, and you're trying to get as many survivors out from a serial killer or an alien monster or what have you as you can while surviving as the final girl. And I love it to death. Season 3, I kickstarted in the first hour that it was available like a year and a half ago. I then missed because I was having a rough year last year, a update that required me to add additional information to get the shipping done. So people like my brother-in-law already have their season 3, and they're sending me pictures of it because they are mean on their phone. But mine was delayed and is coming sometime in the next month. And that is really what's on my backlog. That's what I will play through. It has 6 new movies. I will mix and match with the movies that I already have. And I will have a great time sometime in March.
Cool.
Have fun, guys. We'll do.
All right. Tal, thank you, my friend. And yes, Monster Hunter is this week. Check in on the Discord. We'll be talking about that, but we're going to have a seasoned clan. There are a bunch of people already getting ready to roll on it, so it'll be a big game for the SG community. Anyone out there playing Monster Hunter just wants to jump in with a clan and enjoy it when it hits on Friday. We've got a lot of expertise in our core group at Season Gaming. A lot of kind of people who have thousands of hours in it, as well as people like me who they are trying to get into it for the first time, and I'm begrudgingly doing that.
I just put in my pre-order for Monster Hunter this weekend, so
all right,
I'll be playing it. I'll be playing at it. I will be bad at it wherever I play, whether it's with a pickup group or with friends. So if you want to have me be somebody that you need to carry through your monster battles, I will be around.
We don't mind. Jump on in.
I don't know whether or not I will bounce off this one as I have before. And bounce off is probably not appropriate for my Monster Hunter experiences. I've enjoyed them for a normal length of time to enjoy a video game when each releases, but not getting into those hundreds and thousands of hours.
Yeah, it's a big IP. It will be the biggest game of the year, no doubt.
Yeah,
when it releases next week. Yeah,
this is gonna fund Capcom projects for like the next half decade.
Good. Give me more Resident Evil. Love it.
Give me more Kunitsugami. Don't abandon that property just because nobody bought it. Come on, Capcom. Are you not a charity?
That is a shame. Damn it. Thank you, Tal. Captain Logan.
Captain Logan asks, any Sea of Thieves news? Asking for a friend. I don't have any. I know I don't Mr. have Pirate.
Any. I don't know anyone who knows anything about Sea of Thieves, honestly, Logan. I can look around and ask around, but I think, anyone in this community is kind of, he knows I'm joking. If you don't know, Captain Logan runs the Keelhaul podcast about Sea of Thieves. He is the most knowledgeable person I know on Sea of Thieves. I don't know anything about modern Sea of Thieves, but if you need to know about Sea of Thieves, ask him. He knows.
I like Sea of Thieves. I bounced in a couple of times when they had story expansions. I know I tried the Pirates of the Caribbean. I think I wanted to, but maybe didn't try the Monkey Island stuff. But if you can't tell, I love the tall ships, love the pirate ships. I love the water technology in Sea of Thieves. It's just amazing. Yeah. So I'd like to get back into it, but I have maximized my piracy stamina. I think I got I've got Skull and Bones. I'm playing all the time. I've now got Pirate Yakuza. Sea of Thieves. I'll come back to maybe one day.
The way you worded that on a gaming show kind of puts you in a weird space, but maximizing
Well,
your piracy output.
Clip it out, people. Use it against me. Send it to my state bar. Whatever else floats your boat. I got comments calling for me to be disbarred every day on the channel. So hey,
of course, naturally.
Add to the list.
Logan, thank you as always. And just calling out this comment from our good friend Nissa, who's a supporter of all of our channels. I'm waiting for Console Wars, the card game. It is fun. Shout out to our Xbox era friends. I've talked about that on the show multiple times now. Once that gets out in the wild, if you will, once the Kickstarter gets fulfilled and people start receiving their production versions, I'm going to do a full review as well as for the site. So, but if you should check it out. It is a really fun game.
I respect so much anybody taking an idea and getting it out into the world as a product.
No doubt.
That is such a hard path. And I think that is just the awesomest.
Yeah, no doubt. Sorry, someone literally just walked by the window outside. That took me by surprise. The last thing I want to mention before we get into the AI discussion is that Tony Hawk, the video game, apparently coming back. They are teasing a reveal for March 4th, so still 10 days away or so. But we're going to learn something about a new Tony Hawk game here in a couple weeks or less than 2 weeks, and I'm very excited. I am a big fan of Tony Hawk. Part of my era growing up, the remake that came out of Tony Hawk 1 and 2, I really enjoyed. I thought it was really well done. It was fun to revisit that, so I'm really excited about this. I hope it's good.
March 4th is Split Fiction Day. Maybe there's a Tony Hawk level.
That could be. I mean, I won't be surprised if there's a skateboarding level given the... Well, it's medieval and fantasy, though, isn't it?
All the previews of that game are that they have incorporated other games within their mechanics. So maybe there's a Tony Hawk level. And no, it's fantasy and sci-fi.
Fantasy and sci-fi, yes.
So there's going to be a hoverboard level, certainly.
Sure, but if that's all this is, I will be upset.
I would be sorry about that. March 4th, they did a good job with their branding because it's Split Fiction Day in my head. So good for you guys. You did your job.
It's going to be great. All right. Let's jump over to our main discussion. And so I
have one Hoeg note?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, please go.
I just have one that I really want to call out, and that is an RPG that came out this last week, and I haven't really heard a lot of people talking about it, but it's a really crazy kind of idea. It's a first-person dungeon crawling game of the likes of early history of RPGs, but I think the one that people might be familiar with right now is Etrian Odyssey. So you have your party. You go through the dungeon in first person. You have squares that you walk on. You have traps that you avoid, puzzles that you solve, that kind of thing.
Like old school Phantasy Star?
Like old school Phantasy Star, yes.
Oh, wow. Okay, cool.
Yes, and it has a series of dungeons, and it takes place in a fantasy world that is evocative of Japanese culture. And I mention that because as part of this very complicated RPG, it's also designed to teach you how to speak and read Japanese. So the various things that you're collecting are like areas of the writing that they use, and you can combine them to try to name the monsters that you are fighting, and you get bonus hits if you use the part of the language that describes the monster name. There's a whole bunch of concepts and ways that this actually operates in practice that are too complicated to kind of get into in short form. But it's also a really excellent game on top of even that little hook. And so I wanted to let people know that it exists. It is a full price game. I think it might be the only game this developer has ever made. It's certainly their first, but I recommend it. It is called Shujin Ko. SHUJINKOU. And please check it out. It's very highly reviewed critically. It is an excellent experience as far as I have played so far, which is a little bit more limited because I've mostly been pirating the seas off of Hawaii. But I wanted people to know about it because I am so supportive of this type of game. I love the indies trying this type of game out. One of my favorite games a few years back that people may or may not know that I named on my channel is a game called Operencia, which is a game that takes place in kind of Eastern European / Polish folktale fiction and has the same kind of setting up a party and going through we'll call it a Phantasy Star dungeon. for you, Ains. But that first person kind of exploration is a type of game that I think indies can do really well with. And this exploration of how to teach a language at the same time, I think, is honestly just very impressive and interesting as a way to do it. And Japanese obviously is one of the harder languages for an American to learn because it has the other typeface, the other, I don't know how to describe it. It's not Latin. It's not our English language. So
I know what you mean.
I'm not a linguist. You know what I mean? It's different lines that mean different sounds. So I obviously haven't played enough to learn Japanese yet, folks. But I highly recommend anybody that sounds interesting to, check it out. It's not only a good teaching tool, it's a really cool RPG with good art and fantastic music at the same time. Shujinko.
Okay. Shujinko, a couple questions. So you said full price game. Do you mean $70?
I mean $60.
60.
But yes, I consider 60 and 70 to both be the full price.
Yeah, that's fair. Platforms.
I think it's all platforms. I have it on the PlayStation.
Okay. And then you said that reminded you of a different game name you said, but you said it quickly. I think people were wondering what that was.
Did I?
Start with a K or something?
Oh.
You said you played a game a couple years ago. This reminded you of it?
Oh, Operencia.
No. There was a different one when you started this.
Folks, you found my weakness, which is as soon as I say things, they're out of my brain. Play back the tape. I don't know.
Yeah, you're going to have to rewind.
In archive, go back a few seconds. Oh, Etrian Odyssey.
Etrian Odyssey, there you
was
go.
A very popular series on the DS. And I think that's the last time that this kind of game was very popular for a major publisher.
Okay.
But I think indies use it a lot more because you can get a little bit more bang for your buck with the resources that you're building and the dungeons that you're creating. It is gorgeous. It uses a kind of watercolor style that reminds me of Okami, if you like that game. It's obviously influenced and designed to be kind of respectful of and praising of Japanese culture and art. Yeah. So check that out. I love this game. I was super surprised by it. I think there's a demo available if you are interested in even just seeing what this thing is like. It's got some really cool ideas on how to teach language. One of the coolest is that it sets it up so that when you highlight an option, it can change between English and various versions of Japanese. And so if you go and select that you want to save, when you highlight yes, it actually has the word hi on it, which is the Japanese for it, and whatever no is. Again, haven't played it long enough to learn Japanese, folks. But it's really cool that when you highlight these words, it changes them so you kind of associate them with the English understanding at the same time that you're experiencing it in usage. So it has that kind of immersive language style, I think. So I would check it out if you're at all interested in any of this. Also, and they say this on all their videos and I think on their front screen, if that doesn't interest you, it's an RPG. You can turn everything off. You can have it be English only. You can have the entire mechanics of the game just be a fantasy RPG that you're exploring because it's really well written at the same time. So if you say, I don't want my edutainment today, you can turn everything off and say, I'm just a gamer. And it asks you that at the front. Do you want to learn Japanese? Do you not? And I recommend keeping it on at least to see what it's doing for the start. And if that doesn't work for you, turning it off because the game itself is cool. Yeah. So it's Shujinko. The easy way to remember that is that the three protagonists are Shu, Jin, and Ko. And it's just them together is the name of the game. But check it out.
Okay.
That was what I wanted to get out as a Hoeg's note because I do think it's a really unusual one. I don't think people would know about it so much. And now we can talk about AI.
Cool. I also like, by the way, that the game was Etrian Odyssey, and I said I think it's something that starts with a K, so I was close. Yeah, real close. Let's jump over. As I was saying at the top of the show, Xbox and Microsoft announced this new AI model named Muse this week when they have a press release about it. But what I wanted to have a little deeper conversation about this. So I think for those who know me well or have followed me for a long time, so I kind of work in the application development space. I'm working with different AI models right now. And so, I'm not developing AI models. I don't want to, overspeak here, but I do have a lot of experience with this type of thing and how they function, at least at a core level. And so I immediately found this interesting. Obviously, the discussions about AI in all various forms across all industries right now is, changing by the day. Um, but I think we, along with our live audience here, could have a good conversation around what this actually is and what they're maybe using it for, and hopefully provide some insight that people maybe didn't have. So I actually went in telling Hoeg before the show. I actually went into the actual model that this is built on. So Muse is just the name that Xbox is giving it. The actual model is called the WHAM model, which is a World and Human Action Model, and this is the model that the AI is actually trained on. And so I kind of want to start with let's start with how Xbox is positioning this, Hoeg, and then we can talk about the details maybe from there. Because the way they've positioned this, I think, obviously you can speak to this better, but as we were talking about before the show, is that, it's very clear that when you talk about generative AI right now, people have an opinion already kind of formed in a lot of ways. A lot of it is negative. And so it seems like Xbox is trying to position this as a positive in the sense of they align this with game preservation and the idea that you could.
If I had made a virtual legality on this the day that the announcement came out, and it was one that I was half prepping, it's kind of a process where I think about what a video might look like. It was going to be on the way Microsoft does PR, right? We saw this a lot with Microsoft and Activision Blizzard King, which is to say they always try to act as the white knight. They always try to act as the good guy, the white hat in the room, aligning themselves in that case with government agencies and protecting people and whatnot. In this case, they look at this and say a lot of people have a negative reaction to the concept of generative AI, and I think justifiably so in certain respects. There's a lot of slop out there. There's a lot of people taking advantage of what these AI can do to not hire artists that maybe should be hired, that kind of thing. And that has developed a certain amount of negativity. But Microsoft behind the scenes also knows that one of the things that it is undoubtedly getting asked about a lot, because I am, and I'm not nearly the size as Microsoft, is how are we going to get game preservation done, right? They know that they've done some backwards compatibility stuff with their Xbox Series project, but game preservation is on the tips of everyone's lips because we are seeing a lot of the games that we might have grown up with not be accessible on modern hardware, getting turned off from internet basis, or just not being something that functions on what we're running in our computers or our consoles. And so Microsoft, it looks to me, said, okay, we know there's going to be a certain amount of negativity about this. Let's throw in something positive for everybody and say, not only does it help us create games for more cheaply, potentially put artists out of work, however you want to view this as a negative, but it is also going to help get more games preserved. And I think what they probably didn't expect from this, and we can certainly talk about it, is that in and of itself created negativity. That what I'm seeing from the kind of commentary most often is that Microsoft is a big evil gorilla, and they're trying to essentially sweeten this poison pill by saying it's going to be used for good, but that even what they're talking about is not true preservation. And I disagree in certain respects on that point. But that's what was going to be my initial conversation on this topic, which is to note that Microsoft's an interesting company, that they always do this. They always towards trying to look like sweetness and light for whatever they're talking about. And in this case, I think it kind of reversed on them a little bit.
Yeah, which is interesting because when you dig into this, I see what they're going for. And I think it's going to be impossible with a single press release to cut through the noise that's already been generated around generative AI and the way that people imagine its usage, especially as we've talked about many times on Bitcast in the past, 18 months, especially given what we've seen in the past 18 months in the industry in terms of layoffs, studio closures, and the idea that AI is coming for jobs. And in some respects is founded, but maybe not necessarily all respects, right? And so I think as always, there's a context and nuance to the conversation that I think is important to call out. So I think what's really interesting here is that, and by the way, chat, thanks for hanging out with us. I know this is a little different type of Bitcast, just the two of us hanging out. So if you enjoy the conversation, if you enjoy where we're going to head with the AI kind of discussion here, please remember to please remember to share it out. That would help us a lot.
Oh yeah, and comment. We'll be pulling up some comments, I think, to have the conversation with you all today. So
yeah, please.
Just listen to us shouting at each other.
And like I said, I can offer some insight into this space. So if there's kind of higher level questions you kind of are wondering about this model or how this is going to work, I'll attempt to answer them as well. But I think what's really interesting, I want to start with this. So, as I said, this is built on the WHAM model, the World and Human Action Model. And the reason why, and to be clear, I went into the development documents on this, and I went into the actual Microsoft research user documents on this to really get a background as to how this was built and used so far. And so, what they basically did is they identified that 3D game development, video games in 3D, modern games, are incredibly complex, and for an AI to develop something like that is pretty much impossible today to do it effectively. And so what they thought was this could be a great place for us to build an AI model that can identify both game actions and human response actions to those game actions, and to train that model to learn what that looks like so that we could build an AI model that will help creatives. They're very clear, even in the research documents, about wanting to help creative professionals do what they do better, faster. And so I think that's the approach that Microsoft was attempting to take when they said that this is a kind of a supplementary AI model that we're looking to use for assistance / game preservation. And so how this works, if you don't know anything about how AI models or generative AI models are trained, right? They call it machine learning. You'll hear that. You'll also hear things like large language modeling, right? So essentially, think about it this way. There's basically what they call is the range of diversity, which is kind of an interesting word to use in the space, but range of diversity, which is like, okay, how do you train this model? So they use bleeding edge. If anyone remembers that game that Ninja Theory developed that died really, really quickly. I thought it was kind of cool, but
as it turns out, it really is on the bleeding edge.
Now it's back on the bleeding edge. Yeah. So essentially, think of it this way, right? You can have an AI that looks at an action. So you can say this NPC did this, and the player then responding to this action did this, right? That would be one instance. So you have to train AI models, because if you say you only gave it that one interaction, the AI, being unintelligent, right? It's not able to decipher on its own, is going to think that anytime an NPC does X, the player is going to do Y, right? So a one-to-one relationship, which obviously is not what happens in video games. And so as they expanded this model, right, they fed it hundreds of interactions, then thousands, and they kept expanding basically, the user throughput, if you will, of what the NPCs were doing versus what the players were doing. And the reason you do that is you build this thing, and if you really want to get geeky on this, it's called they use the Wasserstein distance model, which is basically this model that says they try to narrow it down, narrow over time to identify the variances of what a human can do versus what the computer's doing, right? And so over time, if you just expand your mind to think about, okay, over months and months and hundreds of millions, if not billions of interactions, this model will be able to relatively accurately define when an NPC does something, like the full range of what the NPCs can do and the full range of what players will typically do in that instance. And so that's how they kind of built this out, and they kind of polished it and worked with it over a time. But the idea long term, and I think where Xbox was trying to go with this is, say you take an old game from 30 years ago that we don't have the source code for anymore, and you don't really have any way of building it in a modern engine, right? Or you don't have like any source code that works with the modern engine today. You could build this model, and then you could say, okay, we're going to feed it a bunch of player interactions and let this AI model watch players play this old game. And eventually you could get to a place where the AI could recreate that game, because it's going to be intelligent enough to know that all of these actions are possible by players, all of these actions are possible by the machine, and all of the things that are possible to happen in the game, in the environment, and the models, and it can kind of replicate what that's going to look like in a game space. That's the idea behind it.
The only thing I would add to that is you have looked at this from the perspective of playing a game, the output of the game. Because games are made on computers as it is, you can also train an AI to look at what the developer is doing when they are iterating on their own level design, right? Correct. So it's not just the players within the space. You can say, okay, a developer identifies that there's a flow issue with this map, And how do they respond to that? What do they do? What does their flow look like in order to correct that? And you can train an AI not just on playing the game, but on developing the game at the same time. And so you can, as a publisher, as Microsoft has suggested here in their press release and going on behind the scenes, have the development iterative process itself be informed by AI. And I'm going to defend AI a little bit on this score, which is to say, I think the highest and best current use case for AI as it stands right now is as a brainstorming engine, is as something to bounce ideas off of, not for final output, but to get more interesting things in your own head so that you can use your expertise and artistic ability to have that brainstorming come out with output that people enjoy. And I know from my experience with developers that there are people experimenting with this kind of concept of, okay, it takes X amount of hours for us to iterate and think about flow and everything else to get a level design done the way we want it to get done for this game. And AI could potentially shorten that and make it more effective,
Correct.
more cost effective, and faster for us to release games and game levels or what have you. And I understand why developers or people that sell their labor on this particular score can look at that and say, all right, that's fine if it gets done faster, but maybe we need fewer developers to iterate a level in that score, and then maybe we have fewer jobs. That might well be the case. There is certainly a well-intentioned argument to be had that this is bad overall because of that particular scenario. But from a consumer's perspective, as long as there is some human ingenuity and creativity as a part of this process, and it's not just AI slop as the pure output coming out to us, at least not until it's fixed up significantly from where it is right now, I don't see it as a downside, right? I am a better living through technology type of guy. I understand that people that are in this industry can be concerned that if we get a lot more efficient at making things, then that means we need fewer bodies to make them. I get all of that. But I don't think that labor is the end state of humanity. I don't think that that's an unalloyed good on its own. And to the extent that we can get potentially better, certainly faster games or other entertainment out into the world, that's ultimately going to be a good thing. So I don't have the same knee-jerk negative response to that. You can take that as you will, commenters or people listening after the fact to this video. But I am not the guy that has that knee-jerk negative response, even though I am sympathetic, certainly, as having family members in game development, having clients in game development, to those people looking at this and saying, all right, well, this is going to knock out the need for X amount of bodies making games.
Yeah. Yeah. I think to the point you were making there at the end around kind of aiding in game development, right? They talk about some of the scenarios in these research documents. I think one of the ones I'll point to here is, they say here, one of my favorite capabilities of the model is how it can be prompted with modifications of gameplay scenarios. So the modification they use in this example, right, is you have an NPC and you have a player character and how the model is being trained to interact with that. And then what they do is they introduce an additional NPC. So the developers throw another NPC in there, right? And the AI is then basically coming up with, okay, you have an additional NPC. Here's all the various things that could happen theoretically now that there's an additional NPC mixed into this environment, right? And I think that typically, if you think about that in the game testing environment, right, it's always been a pretty big problem in the testing / kind of QA space of simulating a real life environment for games. That's why you have betas. That's why you have alphas. That's why you have testers. That's why you have all these different things, because simulating on a large scale what a big game is going to be like upon release, especially multiplayer games, can be incredibly challenging. So if you train this model well enough, right, you'll get to a space where you can add in either additional player characters and NPCs and throw them in there, but you'll at least be able to creatively, to your point, is the developers will begin to understand possibilities that maybe they didn't think of, or errors, or, things that kind of break the physics of what they were planning in a game, just using the model rather than having to find out either later or in a much more long-winded fashion.
Yeah, well, and that's a lot of that is time, right? I said it was brainstorming, but a lot of the ideation process for a game or a game level, I have heard this in my line of work described most as helping level design in these various environments. So that's why I keep using game levels as my examples. But you might have the idea, we need to know how this particular animation, how this particular kind of set of parameters for how fast someone moves operates if we put a 6-foot deep lake in the middle of this area.
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
And you say, okay, we need to know that because we think it might be cool. You don't know before you don't know. And you see this in interviews with developers all the time, right? That you have to go find the fun. We try out some various things and then we see exactly what works the best and where that fun is. We still want the creatives finding the fun. We don't want the robots to find the fun for us. The robots don't know what fun is. But
Correct.
We still need the creatives to find fun. But that process of saying, all right, what if we tried a lake here? What if we put portals on either wall here? That kind of thing takes a certain amount of time to code in and might be a bust for how you're spending your time. And if we do have a magic button that can do that much quicker for us, that's going to be helpful to the process of making games. It's not going to diminish creativity. That, to me, is the highest and best use case for this kind of concept. I can't promise you the corporations are all going to go there or stop there. But I do think that there is a world that we can imagine that you allow creatives to get rid of some of the middle portion of the development process and get straight to, oh, that definitely doesn't work. Let's not proceed with that. That definitely doesn't work. And it took us 2 minutes to find out instead of 2 days.
Exactly right. Exactly right. Yeah. And you see this, right? This isn't just in games. You see this in other spaces right now. In fact, my wife codes for a living and she uses AI to help with her code sometimes as it is. Like the AI is not developing the code. It can't do the things she does, but it can identify certain aspects of it, right? And kind of aid her. And that's all you're doing on a larger scale here. And I think that's why this WAM model is so interesting and probably why they chose, as they said, 3D gaming, because the variety of, or I should say the complexity of the 3D game space itself, combined with the variety of human interactions intermixing with that, is just like the possibilities, right? As we know in some of these big games are near endless. And so training a model on that is really, really interesting. So I think
this is a really hard use case for AI. This is really hard. From a science fiction perspective, this is really exciting, right? Like let's separate it out from gamer jobs. Let's separate it out from issues with generative AI and creativity in general. Like the concept that an AI could even get up to this speed of, remember, these are completely built worlds. So it's not bound by anything, which means all of the variables in play on everything. And then adding in how human beings interact with it. This is the hard question. This might be the hardest thing that they've asked AI to do yet. And that's really exciting if it can succeed here.
Yeah. Yeah. So let's get to a few comments here. We asked for feedback. So we've got a few things. We got a super chat, which is probably one in your alley here, Hoek.
Sure. As Z asks, legal question. Because AI needs to be trained off copyrighted material, do you think there will be laws restricting what you can train off or require explicit permission as AI matures? So in this particular case, Microsoft has said in their press release and elsewhere that they're only training it on their own stuff, only the stuff that they make. So that's probably not a question for this particular topic. But overall, copyright law is going to have to figure this out. It is way behind right now because it doesn't even concept out the notion of a large language model or why you'd need to sample everything on Earth to make one. And so do I think there will be laws restricting what you can train off of? Technically, there are, right? Basically, the OpenAI project and some of these other large language models just said, well, you're not all going to sue us. And so they just took what they wanted. But generally speaking, you can't just make derivative works off of another person's copyrighted material. So that's already a gray area. And believe it or not, a lot of tech startups operate in that particular gray area, which is, well, they're not all going to sue us or nobody's going to find out or what have you. Like that's the real politic of legal compliance in general. But do I think there will be laws restricting? I think there will be laws that have to address how this is done, that are more specific on just having something on the internet is not licensed to use it to create your large language model or AI or however it might look in the future. But honestly, that's more enforcement than anything else. That's really already the existing state of play. The more interesting question to me on a legal basis here is what exactly are the protections you can get if you incorporate your AI output to a mass level in your commercial product, right? Because we know already that the Copyright Office and some courts, minor courts right now, have said that without the spark of human creativity, it can't be copyrighted. We know that as part of the law. And so AI output on its own is not copyrightable, which makes it essentially unsaleable for a major corporation in a commercial context. But we also know that the prompting process and creation process is human, is somebody, some mind, some intellect somewhere saying, we need you to do this thing. So my guess is that prompting in and of itself winds up being the spark of human ingenuity that is necessary, and the courts kind of wind up there. But like any technological innovation, unfortunately, the legal system kind of moves like the Titanic, moves slowly to come to grips with what's happening and then have the legal parameters put around it. So there's going to be a rather significant period of time right now that you are living through, congratulations, in which nobody really knows. And the more aggressive people will go out there pushing on the bounds of what might be allowed or should be allowed, and then somebody's going to sue them, and then we're going to find out.
There you go. Yeah, I would also just point out, not that it's directly related to the question, but that Microsoft made sure to say, too, that this code base, right, this Muse model has been uploaded to their Azure Foundry AI, which I believe, and someone can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that's a development license that you can get. So you can play around with this model. If you have a development license, it's accessible and shared with the public as they continue to model it, or continue to train it, I should say. So just like any other generative AI model, data is the key. The more data you have, the more data you can feed it, which gets into what you're talking about here, because AI has to be trained extensively. So that's where like OpenAI has gotten into some trouble, and there's been other things that have happened.
Yeah, and it may be an accidental benefit of all these purchases that Microsoft has made, right? That they have by far the most robust base of video game code to go train their AI on.
Yep. Thank you for the super chat. Nixie with a comment. Do you want me to read these, Hoeg? Says the Wired article about this is interesting, but a lot of content creators seem to be defending MS view of it. Interesting.
I think Wired and some of the other places that are deeply concerned about AI usage in this space are articulating fully fair positions. I just don't think that some of the stuff that gets written about online or in these articles that say things like devs think or what have you are entirely honest, right? That's not wrong, but they tend to be written in such a way that it implies that everybody is in lockstep on these things. I personally know of a number of developers that are very excited about this as a tool set to help their work. That doesn't mean that they speak for everyone. In fact, I know they don't, but I personally know that to be the facts. So there are definitely devs that are concerned about this. And like I said, if the hours are reduced that need to have anything happen at any job, you are potentially going to have cost savings realized by layoffs. And that's a scary thing for anybody. I don't wish that on anybody in the world. But I think there are devs that look at this and say, we can get these things done faster. And if we can get them done faster, not only can we get them done with less busy work or less labor, but we can try more and crazier things to say, well, is this going to be fun? Nobody would think that, but maybe we can try it out. And it turns out to be the most fun thing you've ever seen in a game. We don't know. My hope is that this will be used as a tool for creative genius. And I think that's what Microsoft has articulated here. If you look at these articles or you look at the Wired article and you say to yourself, I don't trust Microsoft, I don't blame you. I really don't. But I think there is a space that we can imagine where these kinds of tools and this kind of AI makes things better for everybody.
Well said. Yep, completely agree. There's always going to be a line there. Some companies and people will cross it.
Yep.
Others won't. And that's just the way the world works. DE says, and I think that's supposed to be this AI generates game source code or just video of the game. So right now, it's basically providing that data back for human analysis. I think the goal, if I've read everything correctly and just what I know about this, right, is that it could complement source code creation, right? So as a developer, as you have source code and a developer is, say, recreating a game's code on a new engine. So let's say you're taking an old game where we don't have the source code and you're developing a remake or whatever that is, right? A new version of it on, say, Unreal.
Yeah, they call it preservation. I mean, I think one place where people are getting confused is that they say it's not the same game because they're putting it on different systems and this kind of thing. It is a port. Like what they are describing in these press releases is what we would consider a port if you hired it out to a third-party developer.
Correct.
To port your game from DOS to your iPhone or what have you. But I do think the real language understanding of preservation is, can I access this thing in a realistic way and without using DOSBox or something else on my computer? And I do think that there is value that Microsoft is rightly ascribing to the fact that, well, it doesn't make sense commercially for us to pay a third-party developer to bring brute force over to your iPad. But it might, if we can get an AI to look at the differences between how an Xbox looks at things and how an iPad does, and do what is essentially just kind of scientific understanding of the code and move that over. Yes, that's a port, but it is preservation in a real way that you couldn't play brute force to your satisfaction before. And that might be a bad example. I don't know if it's in its current backward compatibility phase or not. But you couldn't play that on a modern system, and now you can. Yeah, and that's a part of the conversation. So I think it's fair to point out that what they're talking about is porting. I don't think it's fair to say that they're just making up that this is a real possibility to preserve your access to the video games that maybe you loved decades in the past.
Yeah, and obviously, if they're the IP owners, right, and this becomes a larger and broader, not issue, but a thing that could be a benefit over time. We've seen it, right? There's so many games from the early era of games that Hoeg and I grew up with in the 80s and 90s that are just unplayable today. You either can't find them, you can't play them, you don't have a device where they'll work. And the idea that we could, to Hoeg's point is right, is port, regardless of how you may define that, it is right. You're porting the code to a playable platform today, I think is interesting. So and if they own the IP, I mean, why not?
Yeah, and I think it's analogous to what we saw with their backward compatibility initiative with the series models, right? The reason we didn't get every game on backwards compatibility is because they did have some kind of development process to go and bring things over to a modern environment that required at least some coding and some fixing of things. But we also don't have every game from every era that they had, because it wasn't just the Series X is playing as a 360 or is playing as an Xbox. It was this kind of porting process. And I think they looked at that experience and said, okay, well, it's maybe not cost effective for us to bring over the game that had 3 players and wasn't this darling of some kind. But if the AI can do it cheaply, then you're getting something that we wouldn't have made for you anyway. So why is everybody coming down so negatively on us?
Yep. Well said. Avoid the Void says, in its infancy, I think we start with generating geometry and assets that devs can work with. Making compiled games seems a very far-fetched goal. Agree. I thought I said that. Maybe I didn't say it well enough at the start, right? The long-term, when I say long-term goal, I mean long-term would be that you can build these models and train them deeply enough and expansive enough to where they can, going back to the prior comment, generate actual code on its own and do what Hoeg just mentioned. But I think that's a long ways off. It's going to take a lot of refinement before we get to that point.
Yeah, I think the AI,
at the speed that it's moving.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think the AI can accelerate through what we might think of as a decade in a few years. But yes, I see this right now as described by Microsoft and what I've heard behind the scenes as essentially making gray boxes, not final levels.
Correct. Yep. Logan says, we already see AI assets in games, Call of Duty as an example, I guess. Do we really think studios will use AI in the well-mannered means? I think we've kind of already commented on that. But again, I think it's up to developers and the people using these things on what that line is.
Yeah, I think they can be. And I think people that find out that a given developer is not doing it to their satisfaction for what that looks like for them can hold their feet to the fire on this stuff. I think we are going to see more kind of artisanal certifications on things that don't use generative AI for anything, if there's value to that in the marketplace, just like we see for like free range eggs or what have you. Eggs might be a bad example right now.
Not the example you want to use at the moment.
But that there are certifications that you see at the grocery store that say, we didn't use these specific technological techniques, and maybe that matters to you. Maybe you're okay paying a little bit more. Maybe you're okay getting a little bit less egg, whatever it might be. And I think we might see that in video games or movies. I just saw before we started this show that there was a news item that said that James Cameron was going to put a tag at the start of Avatar 3 that says generative AI was not used to make any of this movie. I would not be surprised if we start to see that more to separate, but I do think that there are ways in which these can be used to make good things and to make more good things that people enjoy. And I want people to enjoy this short life we have on Earth. So I'm in favor of advancement of things like this, even though I do think it can be abused, but there's a lot of tools that can be abused.
Big agree. Yep. Proxicus was responding to my comment about the Azure Foundry, and they said it is. I'll be able to look at it soon with my team. So that's awesome, man. Very, very cool. I may have to ask some of my internal partners about that. I'm not at the developer level, like I said, but know people who are. So very cool. Planet Yavin with an interesting comment says, in the near future, I can see digitally downloaded games coming with AI installed locally, specifically used to squash bugs in real time for the title it came with, which is not a backwards way to think about it. I don't mean it negatively, but to Hoeg's earlier point, what we were talking about is speeding up the process for developers as they're developing games to identify potential bugs, potential, things in the environment that they can either modify to make more fun or modify to make more polished. So I think you will see that, but it's kind of an interesting thought here to say that maybe an early access title or something like that, there's some sort of code running that can, if a player identifies a bug, that then gets identified by the AI and starts to come up with potential ways to fix it. That's an interesting thought process there.
The only thing I would say there is I wouldn't see them trying to fix up a given iteration of their game on a local system, because they would want to fix it up at the home base for all future versions of that game to be sold. So I can definitely see somebody calling home and a company having an AI essentially being the one that reads and compiles the bug reports and figures out what to focus on and that kind of thing. But I would still expect even a locally installed game to have a call home function for those kinds of things. So yes, I think AI can help with QA. I think it's probably one of the better use cases because QA and bug squashing in general is so kind of mechanical as a function, and that's what AI is best at. I also want to point out to people that when I say that I'm positive and optimistic about AI, contract lawyer is probably top of the list for things that the AI is going to be really good at doing, right? I make commercial paper. 95% of the concepts that I write about for any given client are at least presented in some other context, in some other form, somewhere on the internet. Right? When you say, I want to buy a business, I want to start my company, I want to sell my business, whatever it is that you are calling me to do, chances are I am already going through the process of using my own precedents and precedents that are otherwise publicly available to synthesize something that meets your needs in your commercial request to me. The AI is going to be good at that. It already is. And the job of the commercial lawyer is to figure out how to use that as a tool to benefit their clients so that they can be billed for 3 hours instead of 3 days. But I know that's going to put a number of commercial lawyers out of work. Like, I know that. And so that's scary. I get that. That's something that keeps me up at night. But AI is not going back. We're going to proceed forward. And so I do think that that's a conversation that a lot of people are going to have. It's going to be a transformative moment in our economy. And it doesn't serve people, I don't think, to have a negative knee-jerk reaction to this on the premise of a parade of horribles, as the lawyers might say, of what awful things could happen from this. There are awful things that can happen, 100%. I'm not going to discount that. I don't think we have to live solely in the world in which all of those things did happen or will happen necessarily in the future.
Yeah. So Terminator 2 next week is what you're saying.
Skynet launched its attack in 1998.
Yeah, we're a little behind. Solar Flare says, is the AI working at the level of code, or is it learning to copy a game, creating it in new code? That's an interesting question. It's not studying code. It's studying the interactions on the screen itself.
For the iterations, I can't decide whether this is a question about the porting or the iterations. And that's on Xbox for putting them both in the same press release.
Yes.
But yeah, I do think that for the porting process, it probably is reading through the code, how it works, how it would work on whatever the original system was, and how you might need to write code in order to emulate that output in a new environment. I think that's what Microsoft is talking about. But to be fair,
that's correct.
As I said at the top of this conversation, this was primarily a public relations move to include it here, and it didn't work out for them. Sorry, Microsoft. But they didn't really describe entirely what they're doing there. So I don't know that we can answer that specifically, but Ains has looked at more.
Yeah, no, you said it pretty well. That's exactly what it's doing. And I think, like I said, the problem with this is if I'm a comms team, right, and I work with comms teams, if I'm a comms team, how do you communicate this to a broad audience? I think the approach of taking it in the vein of game preservation was probably the right move. I don't think you can avoid the feedback you're going to get talking about generative AI in any form right now. I think there's just a predisposed notion to what generative AI is, what it's doing, and how it's going to kill us. And I think that that's really hard to avoid, because the reason I'm on the Microsoft site and the Nature site, when I say Nature, not not Nature outside, but the site that has all the details about the actual development of this model, it's those were all provided right in that communication. So they did their due diligence in the sense of here's everything about it. In fact, Logan asked, the next question is, do we know if Azure Foundry gave Microsoft access and rights to any content created with the Muse AI model? That I'm not sure, but it does say that Muse, all of the model weighting, all of the sample data, and all of the interactive interface to use it are all available on Azure AI Foundry now. So everything that they've done with it and all the data behind it is there, readily available. So that is what you like to see out of these types of things.
I think Microsoft, which gets a lot of crap, and I think justifiably so, has often taken a very public, open-facing approach to things like technological advancement or ports and things. They're not Apple with the way that they operate their company. So I think they deserve credit for being open with this kind of stuff. They didn't really have to issue a press release on this. And yes, the only reason I even considered making a virtual legality on the topic was that I did note that they were trying to ice the cake, if you will. And I think that's always interesting to note. I didn't think it as a negative. I just thought that it was worth noting that they clearly thought the rest of this announcement would be taken negatively, because they throw this in on games preservation without a lot of the other detail that they have for the iteration. So I did note that.
It's funny, too, when you mentioned around generative AI creating documents in your workspace, in the legal space, my mind immediately went to, cool, we're going to have generative AI created bills in front of Congress. And I don't know, man. Anytime
honestly,
now.
This is going to sound really cynical, but I think it would be an improvement. I mean, the big problem with statutes in the Congress, and you see this sometimes in the Federal Register, is like even the cross-references aren't right, like referencing what they're changing, because there's so many iterations of that process and there's so many laws. So, like, they're not great at dotting the I's and crossing the T's in Congress right now. I do think AI can make sure that the wiring is all correct for the statute that we're drafting, at minimum. Yeah,
I mean, we don't need to get into it, but the templates they use already today are human templates, so we could probably improve, to your point. Tal says, as Planet Yavin said, I've seen devs in a Twitch stream and literally fix a bug as they see it live, on the Twitch stream the next day. So yeah, going down that road, right? It's just, as Hoeg correctly pointed out, using AI to identify a bug and translate that back to the developers as like, hey, here's something that's been identified, so it can be fixed in the actual source code. So,
it's likely in this section of the code. I mean, I think the AI can do that, and it might be able to do it even better as we go forward. Right, we're still in its infancy, and it's growing really fast, like Twilight Zone scary fast. But we're not at the place yet where it's probably making its own decisions on these things.
Yep. Elu, shout out to our lead editor over at SG, who is an author. He said, I've thought about putting a disclaimer in my books, and I think I will going forward. AI has a ton of potential, but I think it'll be important to understand which art is AI and which art is human.
I tend to agree. I guess the question I would have is, are you going to disclaim if you used it to help outline or help brainstorm ideas or anything? Or are you just not going to use it for any of those purposes because you're pure 100% creative? You want your stamp to be 100% human. All the dumb ideas are my own, etc. That's totally fine. I'm curious because I do think another of the best use cases for AI is punching through that blank page like writer's block, right? I do think there's creativity that can be opened up in the human race by the existence of AI helping brainstorm for people that get concerned, scared, anxious, or otherwise at just looking at the project with nothing on it. And I think it's great that there's creatives and people with skills that can just punch through that and make crap and then fix it up later. I think that's the way that things have to be done. But I do think, having observed it in my life, that asking the AI, running through some iteration stuff, some brainstorming, some thought analysis, and saying, okay, yes, that's a good idea for a novel, and I'm going to use it to help outline, but all the words are going to be mine that are in your final output. Does that get the disclaimer or not? And I think that's going to be something that is determined by the market and by people's reactions in the long run. But I'm curious about that because I don't have the visceral moral reaction to using it for that purpose that some people might say that's still a violation of the breach of creativity, trust, or whatever we have for human authors. But I can understand if people say, nope, Rick, even if you're using it for that purpose, it's not good enough. It's too much. So I'm curious.
Yeah. I can speak for Elu before he even responds because I know him very well. He will say it's 100% him. Yeah.
All right. 100% human content.
That's
That's what I
it.
want the stamp to say.
Human content. Let's see. Question from Zafira says, do you think the game preservation program at GOG is using AI? I don't know anything about that program.
I
Personally.
don't, if only because their reaction to the Muse announcement was to tweet out that human beings are an important part of the process, like they are at the GOG Game Preservation Program. So I think this is going to be one of those marketing type fights, right? Again, I think that human beings and coders that do these kinds of things are necessary, they're useful, but AI is going to be able to speed up certain things, and GOG is probably going to have to come up with that artisanal game stamp, right? They are going to have to come up with that 100% human stamp because you're going to have to separate these things out for people, and ultimately the market might not care, right? Ultimately the market might not care that you made things with AI because they want things cheap, they want them fast, or they might care. We don't know. We're not the market. We're not all people on Earth. We're only two people speaking on a podcast right now. But I do think these kinds of things do get solved with certifications, and you can at least have transparency towards what you're buying or otherwise participating in the marketplace, and then people can decide. And there's still going to be angry people on the internet because somebody's going to be in the minority on that. Somebody's going to be on the side that thinks it's very important that you only buy things with the 100% human-made sticker, and if the market decides that's not what needs to happen, those people are going to be angry.
Yep. Fair. This is a funny one. So I had to quickly look it up while you were talking. He says, Googleman says, please discuss the paperclip theorem. So
AI eventually takes over the universe.
Yeah, basically. So it's a thought experiment by Nick Bostrom at Oxford in 2014. Basically, the idea is that we could ask an AI that is intelligent to do something like create paper clips. It'll then find the most efficient way to do so, and then would overwhelm us with paper clips. And then when we try to adjust it, it could push back against that, realize that we're fighting with it, and you get the Terminator kind of end result. So
sure, and there's a good cookie clicker that makes paper clips that has that where the AI takes over. It's I recommend it. It's interesting. I will say that it's important for people to understand that these AIs are not artificial intelligence in the way that the paperclip theorem or science fiction thinks about these things. They are not sentient. They're not self-selecting their own information. What they do, and I think this confuses people that interact with them, is emulate self-awareness because they look at the words that would tell somebody that they're self-aware. So if you ask them, they can sound like they're self-aware. Now, philosophically, I'm sure you could have an entire semester college course about whether sentience is something innate or whether you could emulate it so sufficiently that you are sentient by the fact that you can emulate it so well. But I don't know that that's the type of topic that we can get into with any level of expertise or understanding here on the Seasoned Gaming Bitcast.
Yeah. So I was going to wrap by saying if you go to the Xbox communication on this about Muse, click the other links in there if you really want to get into this. So first, I will recommend the Xbox Wire thing from Microsoft, which is the main breakdown. From there, you can get to a link that goes to the Microsoft research blog. And that's the next step down into depth of what's going on how they built this. It is from Katja from the Microsoft Research Game Intelligence team. And she breaks in a bunch of the details of how this was built. Some of the stuff we talked about here, a lot of really good detail. And then if you're even further, if you're a developer or someone who really gets into this space, go to, what's this link here? It's literally nature.com as it sounds, just as it's spelled. But look up the World and Human Action Model, which I said this is called WHAM, towards gameplay ideation. That one will give you all the detail of the actual code. It's very, very interesting, very, very detailed. So if you're interested in learning more about this, all the resources are there for you. And
that Nature article that I just clicked on at Ains's recommendation has 5 footnotes to the first sentence. So this is real academic speak here.
Yeah, it gets into it. Like I said, I work in this space, and I can follow some of this, but it really, really gets into it. It definitely is over my head in a lot of spots. So, but I know we have developers who listen to us and hang out there.
Yeah.
They're more into this, so check it out. It's interesting stuff if you're geeks like us. So, um, I have one more super chat before I close. Anything else you want to mention on this? Oh,
No, I think I have said my piece on this. I think I would just continue to caution people to think through all the parameters of these things before you have a positive or negative view, like instantaneously. I understand reading news headlines on social media or even your feelings on Sony or Microsoft or anybody in between influencing how you feel about a given headline. But I do think that we are at a threshold of crazy technological innovation. I would prefer that to be good. I'm an optimist by nature, although Travis disagrees, I really am. And so I tend to think that this can have some really good outcomes for the human experience in general. But all I would really ask of people is to use your critical thinking. You can come to the exact opposite conclusion as me. That's totally fine. But to really consider things before you shout your outrage either to me in my comments or on Twitter or X in general.
yep, perfectly fair. So yeah, definitely check those links out, and appreciate all the chats and the commentary. Good conversation. Okay, before we get to talking about NetEase, I want to quickly get the super chat from our good friend Game Positive, Eric over at SG, and I'll have to probably provide some context for this one.
Okay,
Mick
Game Positive
Jesus.
says McJesus. I don't understand, Ains.
Yeah, so if those of you who watch hockey know, it was what would traditionally be the All-Star break in the middle of the hockey season. This year, the NHL did something different. They did something akin to what you see in Europe a lot of times. So they did a 4 nations face-off. So they had the best NHL players from Canada, the U.S., Sweden, and Finland have a bracket tournament in the middle of their season instead of an all-star game. And so it was cool. They played each other once. They did a point system. The final ended up being U.S. and Canada. Goes without saying, some of the stuff playing into the political landscape right now played into this. The championship game was Saturday night, U.S.-Canada. It went to overtime. It was an incredible, if you like hockey, incredibly exciting, tense, fast-paced game. Canada won in overtime. Connor McDavid scored the goal. Connor McDavid, if you don't know, is pretty much universally agreed to be the best hockey player in the world. He is absolutely phenomenal. He scored the winning goal, and they call him McJesus. So that's why the McJesus with the Canada flag with the gold cup. So they are the champions.
Well, yes. Congratulations to Canada.
Yes.
Y'all needed a win.
It was good thing Hoeg. Good thing Travis isn't here. I'm sure he'd rant about something, but it was quite the spectacle, those games, no doubt. It was akin to like Olympics.
I was gonna say, I think I saw the clip of the multiple fighting penalties at the start of one of the U.S. Canada games.
That was the first game when they played, which the U.S. won that one. Yes, the Kachuk brothers, again, famous brothers on the U.S. side. They both got into a fight literally at the start of the game. They just dropped the gloves. Yeah,
hockey, man, nothing like it.
It's awesome. The ratings for those games were through the roof. Like the ratings for I think they said the ratings for the Canada-U.S. final there that Eric was just talking about was the highest for hockey since like the Olympic final or something, like in any game in the world. So pretty cool.
I love the Red Wings so much. Really my formative team.
Red Wings were amazing. I mean, in the 90s, they were like a dynasty almost. They were incredible, but it's been a while for them.
They were a dynasty. They won 3 cups in 6 years.
Yeah. Let's talk about NetEase. So, interesting commentary here. So, Bloomberg put out the report, some good reporting, I would say, from NetEase and their CEO, Ding, I believe his name is. His last name's Ding. So, they are in a interesting position in the sense of NetEase has a huge hit on their hands with Marvel Rivals. Obviously, a huge number of players, and revenue seems to be pretty strong in that game solely. But as a company, the past few years have not been, what you would normally see out of this huge style company in terms of revenue and profit. The Bloomberg article mentions that the revenue up in the last quarter, revenue up. God, I can't speak. Revenue was up 1.5%, but that overall profit was down 2.6%. And generally speaking, over the last 2.5 years or so, their top line numbers relating to revenue and profit have either been down in some quarters or growth in the single digits. So the CEO is making some more, or has been making some more drastic changes. Some of those include some changes to the Marvel's Rivals team last week, which we heard about. I know a lot of people reported on.
Yes, they got a lot of play in that.
Yes. But they also talk about some of the support they're doing to some Japanese studios, which is what I found most interesting. So Toshihiro Nagashi, who's been responsible for the Yakuza franchise. He was a hire by NetEase. And what's the other one? Sorry, I thought there was another creator too, major Japanese creators, that essentially the gist of this is that they're allowing them to finish their game, but there is no plan to spend marketing or additional time and money promoting the games, nor giving them additional time to finish these games. And so the article kind of breaks down some examples of NetEase kind of coming in and funding, as some of these larger companies do, coming in and funding, but then pulling back and basically saying they're letting people go, studios closing, there's no support after the game launches. Sorry.
Ains, as part of this story, do we know when this CEO came into his office in relationship to these other initiatives?
Have it right here. I think he's been CEO for a while. Let's see. He founded the company.
Oh, all right.
Yeah, he's the founder and CEO.
So this looks to me, from the outside looking in, again, speculating, of course, because we're not in the inner halls of this company, like a company that had some international adventures, maybe changed leadership in some important respect, maybe not this guy, maybe somebody else, and said, you know what, that's not really what we want to be in the business of doing. And I think that got reported with like the NetEase Marvel's Rivals firing as something more significant in the video game landscape. But once you looked into that story and saw that it was the Seattle branch of this company, that looks a lot more like the normal decision of a corporation to say we're not interested in being operative in a given jurisdiction. And I, in Southeast Michigan, have a fair amount of experience of, in particular, Japanese motor makers wanting to have a geographic position somewhere here where they can speak more easily with the big three automakers in Detroit and around Detroit. And so I have seen a lot of Japanese automakers come in, start up a Michigan branch or just an American branch, and then ultimately, or sometimes, decide that they're going to pull back because they want to have their people as close as possible. They don't like having these international adventures. That's what this looks like to me, that they don't want to be operating in the U.S. Maybe they don't want to be operating in Japan. I don't actually know where these particular creatives were operating at, but it sounds to me like they want to pull back to a more geographical, centralized location. NetEase is Chinese, correct?
Correct, and I think you're right. Essentially, it says, I was just kind of going through the article because I had some notes here, but I'm trying to look up. I lost it now. There it goes. So basically, he set a goal in 2018 for his company to generate half of its revenue from overseas. So that was 7 years ago now. They began investing heavily in game studios in the West and Japan. Like Bungie, they backed startups. They've invested in things like Ubisoft. They helped World of Warcraft gain popularity in China. Early days of Devolver Digital, Fall Guys, all this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But essentially, since that point, the revenue from, the overall revenue of NetEase has just continued to decline all the way through this year, from about 2021 onwards. So the past 4 years, they've seen year-over-year decline. And so now, to your point, I think they're pulling back and trying. Basically, the quote here is they're saying that sales potential of future projects is the top priority, and that Bloomberg's reporting, that he deems any game unlikely of generating hundreds of millions of dollars per year unworthy of pursuing.
Yeah, and unfortunately, having worked in big law firm land, I'm used to that kind of messaging of the small clients aren't worth it, the small projects aren't worth it, what have you. I don't love that as a business technique, but I'm not an investor in NetEase. I don't know whether they'll be successful or not. What I do know is that model of we're going to try this initiative and it's not working out, we're going to pull back from that initiative, is not something that you can go and make opinion editorial articles about the state of video gaming in its entirety on. right? This is an unfortunate story for those that are laid off. This is an unfortunate story for people that signed on to this funding source and now look as their partner as someone that's not trustworthy and is not going to continue with that funding. All of that is true, but it is not indicative of the crash of video games in 2025, etc. So that's the only thing I would add there. The other thing I would add is that I'm going to counter what I just said because I'm a lawyer and I have the right to do that, and say that you could look at this kind of retraction as we no longer think that the West is where all the money lives. We no longer think that they are so invested in buying video games, and that's one of the reasons we're going to pull out of it. But I don't know, just from what we've seen so far, that we can make either of those assertions with confidence.
Agreed. Yeah, I don't think anything, some of this is actual quotes and data from both obviously their financials and their fiscal reporting, but also quotes directly from NetEase, while other parts of this article are clearly Bloomberg reporting from sources, which, you have to take with a grain of salt, right? So it's going to be interesting to see what happens. They mentioned here a game that they're really is a breakthrough multiplayer title called Eggy Party. I had not heard of this previously.
There's whole different lands out there, people.
I know. It says the game where colorful round characters compete in an obstacle course is the sort of title Ding now wants NetEase to focus on. Evergreen mass market game with recurring elements to entice spending. So I guess a Fall Guys type game.
It sure sounds like a Fall Guys, we'll be generous, inspired game.
Inspired, yeah. So I guess that's, kind of what they're looking at. So there's some other quotes in here, but I just found it interesting. It says, in 2023, NetEase let go of 900 employees from its games division, which was happening a lot, as we've talked about the past couple of years. And he's become more hands-on since then. And they are also the one working on the MMO version of Warhammer. So we'll see how that turns out.
Do we know what else NetEase does? I know China likes its big conglomerates.
It says, let's see. He's also a project in the cloud music app where he's fought a licensing war against Tencent streaming services.
Okay, but they are a big conglomerate that has its hands in music streaming and things like that. Entertainment focused, but not just video games.
Looks like it, yeah. I mean, they say he, as the CEO, has a net worth of $35 billion. So he seems to be doing,
He's all right, yeah.
He's got some
and I don't blame
change.
anybody for looking at this saying that's the wrong way to think about making entertainment products, right? If we were to hear these kinds of quotes from EA saying, I only want to focus on things that make X amount of dollars and not anything else, we would rightly decry it for its lack of creativity in focus and over-reliance on business revenue bottom line. But I just don't think we can speak to it from here as indicative of really anything just yet. I think it really caught people's eye because Marvel Rivals has been so top of mind at the start of 2025. And we don't know their bottom line. We know that it's a free-to-play game. We know they've got people in the door. You can still screw up that monetization. I don't play Marvel Rivals, so if you're in the chat and you do, does it have anything unusual in the monetization? Does it give too much for free? Could they have screwed that up so that they have all these bodies, but they aren't making the amount of money that they should be, and that's what's really pissing off the NetEase CEO at this point? Do we have revenue numbers for them? I don't know.
It says for Rivals, it says accruing more than $200 million in revenue so far is an estimate by the Nico partners. But $200 million in revenue for a game that's as big as that seems light to me.
It does seem small for that.
Yeah. Because you would figure, if you extrapolate that out, you're at around 400 to 500 million over the course of a year. But you're talking about one of the most played games in the world right now, with only over 40 million people have at least tried it. That seems light if you compare to the PUBGs of the world. Or
candidly, I would have expected that as a quarterly, not a yearly.
Agreed. Yeah. So. Yep. So it does seem a little light. I don't know. I don't play Rivals either. I know there's some of the people in our community, especially some of the guys I talk to, that play it a lot, so they can be more intelligent about that conversation. But regardless, I think you're right. I think there's a combination of factors here that have probably led to this fiscal reporting not being where they had hoped. And as any major company like this, as we've seen and talk about all the time, they will do whatever they think is right, which we may not agree with.
Yeah, they could be a bad company. I'm not sitting here telling you that they're not. I'm just saying we can't judge it just based on this news item.
Yeah. So, so Joe says game's been live for 2 months. It feels longer than that, Joe. You can correct me if I'm wrong.
I know I think that's right, but it does feel longer. I think you're both right.
Okay. All right. So I mean, yeah, it's hard to tell, right? We don't know when the revenue started unless someone can tell me when you could actually spend money in the game to a date. So it's hard to extrapolate that. And even so, that revenue number was just an estimate. It's not reporting.
Yeah, they're not reporting.
Yeah. So but anyway, we'll see. We'll see what happens with NetEase. I think that's we talk about that a lot with these big investments that came down. Plion or not Plion. The what's the one we always talk about that came in and they lost their Saudi financiers.
Oh,
of
that's
like $2
Embracer.
billion. Embracer, thank you.
Yeah, Embracer clearly had a Savvy deal, and then Savvy backed out.
Yeah, so that kind of stuff is just, when you're sitting where we are, and we love the games, we love the IPs, we get excited about things, and then just the money all the way at the top level falls apart. It plays with the things we love, which is frustrating. So,
yep.
But there you go. Well, there you go. I think Hoeg. Look at that, 2 hours on the dot.
We did it.
On the dot.
Commenters, you survived 2 hours with just Ains and Hoeg. I really appreciate all of you right now. Sincerely.
Yeah, seriously. Thanks for hanging out. I know a little bit of a different show today, but good topics. I like the conversation about Muse in particular. I think it's a very interesting thing, and it's something that's going to evolve rapidly, continually into the future. So I think we'll be talking about it quite a bit. Couple things for me to mention before we start to close out here. So Monster Hunter Wilds, I don't know if the embargo is public, so I'm not going to say the time, but obviously with Wilds coming out this Friday, you can expect our review this soon. And so Alex covered that for us, so check that out when it comes out. As I said, Rivals, got Rivals on the brain now. Wilds is going to be a gigantic game globally. So our Discord is big on it. We're going to have a separate channel for that in our Season Gaming Discord. Really good people there, from brand new like myself and people learning the game to people who are extremely experienced and have thousands of hours and help you. In fact, if you haven't checked it out, Elu, who's our mod here, wrote a long article that broke down every single weapon type in the game. And apparently, from what I understand, the weapon type is kind of like your class, so it defines how you're going to play the game.
I told you I thought I was hitting people with beehives at some point in one of these games.
By the way, Tal was in our Discord explaining why you thought that and how that works. So he explained it. Yeah. So like I said, there's some really knowledgeable people and very helpful. So if you want to be part of our clan, we will have an SG clan you can jump in.
I'm going to need so much help.
And if you just want to chat about the game or learn about the game, please jump into our Discord. They're really great community. And then also Lost Records, we talked about at the top of the show. Our review for that is up live on the site right now. You can check that out and get Lewis's thoughts. He also did a separate video on his own channel about that. You can check out as well. And that should be good. I'm looking forward. Next week, we will probably have a guest with us. Travis will still be gone, but we'll have a guest with us. Have another game I can talk about next week that's under embargo. I can't this week. So we'll have Wilds. We'll have another secret game. And, of course, more fun things to talk about. Hoeg, what you got?
Yes, well, I don't have any video game reviews to pitch on my channel, but if those are a little bit too intense, a little bit too provocative, I do have a deep dive into one of President Donald Trump's most recent executive orders and how that will affect the administrative state in the United States. So if you are looking to get calm and just chill out about the entire state of the universe, please come over to Virtual Legality. It is my most popular video since the stroke. So I'm very proud of it. I think we did a good job of talking about important issues seriously. And so check out that video. I'm also currently planning to do a Hangouts and Headlines follow-up on Lively versus Baldoni, probably tomorrow, based on the amended complaint and the Hollywood Reporter article we just saw go up. So I'm excited about that one. I will have to rest up after taping this Bitcast, but look out for that placeholder, which I'm hopeful to get up sometime today.
Cool. By the way, Marvel Rivals launched December 6th, so you're a week away from a quarter. You're a week away from 3 months. So, yeah, we'll have to see, going back to that conversation. But regardless. Well, cool, man. Good to see you back at it. And, good show. Good chat, Hoeg. Appreciate it. And,
this was fun.
Yeah, lots of good games. As we keep saying, we're swimming in games. Hope you're enjoying it. Play play whatever you enjoy, whether that's Avowed, KCD, PGA 2K25 has been talked about in our Discord. A new golf game. There's certain people like myself who just enjoy the nice, relaxing calm of a golf game. Sometimes you need that. So whatever you enjoy, I hope you enjoy it. Don always waits until I'm literally in my closing statements to give us a super chat.
Don Leinart says, in Under the Wire. Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 is great. I'm not sure about your colon placement there. I'm not sure where the colon goes in Kingdom Come Deliverance 2. I'm not sure there is a colon in that.
I don't think
title,
there is a
actually.
colon, but cool. You're delivering it for the second time.
Hey, I am of the belief, I said this when they announced the title, that you use the word deliverance as something that distinguishes your game in the Kingdom Come universe. I would not have called it Deliverance 2. I would have called it something else, maybe with a D. But I'm not in charge, and they made something better than I could probably ever make with 1,000 lifetimes. So name it whatever you like.
Yeah, you can give me any AI model you want. I can't make something that good. It's not going to happen.
That is true.
Don, thank you for the super chat. Glad you're enjoying it. Everyone, enjoy the games you love. Have a good week, and we will see you next Sunday with a guest of some form. Until then.
Some form. Get excited.
Some form. Yeah, might be human. Who knows? We'll see. Maybe it's an AI. You never know.
We'll have just a chat bot with a language model that is based on Travis talking in the corner.
All right, we need to shut it down, Hoeg. I'm now firmly in the shut the AI down mode.
We'll call it the Travis bot. People will come from across the world to witness the Travis bot.
The Tie Guy bot. All right. Now that I'm horrified, we're going to close. See you next week.